Hi, this is Logan Garibay, and today we're going to talk about a recent change from Wizards of the Coast concerning Adventure League, and the Player's Handbook +1 rule is now gone. And I want to talk about what that means specifically. I won't bury the lead. I think this is Wizards of the Coast acknowledging that game balance in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, with Tasha's specifically, is dead. Okay? All right, so let's talk about that. All right. So let me define my terms. Adventure League. Adventure League is kind of interesting. Adventure League is this official league that is run at friendly local game shops. Okay? And it's Dungeons & Dragons for pickup groups, and it's really public, right? So Dungeon Masters will go, like really nice Dungeon Masters, or just Dungeon Masters, it's actually the best and the worst, in my opinion. The best, the most noble Dungeon Masters run in Adventure League, they're like, I want to give a good game to the public. And like the absolute worst Dungeon Masters, they're like, oh, nobody will play with me. I'll go play with a pug, a pickup group, right? And so it's run in these friendly local game shops. I absolutely support Adventure League. I did play in Adventure League during 4th edition, right? I haven't needed Adventure League for 10 years, right? And the reason why is I got a super dope group myself, and I get invited to good games, and I have absolutely no need for a public public D&D game. But that's kind of like, that's like a rich person saying, I don't need to go to a library, I can buy whatever I want, right? And so I get that, right? So I really do think Adventure League is very noble. And so it's this really public version of Dungeons & Dragons that I am really happy Wizards of the Coast supports, and I'm really for it, right? And they've had this rule in it where it's Player's Handbook +1. So you could choose Player's Handbook plus one other book, and that's all you got, right? Now, why is it? Why are they so restrictive, right? So when you built your character, you could only use Player's Handbook and Eberron, or Player's Handbook and Sword Coast Adventure Guide, or Player's Handbook and something from Curse of Strahd, or Player's Handbook and Xanathar, right? Well, the reason why they did this was if you mix the different books together, you can make some super powerful builds, right? And when you're playing in these public spaces, they don't want like a Superman and a Robin, right? Like one dude's, one lady's character is ridiculously powerful, and one other lady's, character is just really ridiculously not powerful, right? And then one person looks like a schlub, and the other one looks like this, like Arnold Schwarzenegger type, right, in the game. They don't want it that off balanced, right? So this is a big deal that 7 years into the edition, they're saying we're getting rid of this rule, right? Now, why is this change happening? I think it's a couple reasons, right? The first and foremost is the pandemic, man. This pandemic has just absolutely, it's just kicked the whole, a whole nation of America in the teeth, right? And part of it is these friendly local game shops, right? They're having a hard time getting anybody to play in any kind of public games right now, right? So having this ridiculous restriction that makes the game because when you play in any other Dungeon Masters regular game, they ain't got none of that, Player's Handbook +1 nonsense, right? You can play with as many books as you can buy, right? And as many as your Dungeon Master will allow, right? So, so they wanted to make these FLGS games have the ability to compete with regular Dungeon Master games, right? So they pulled it off for that reason. The other reason is, and man, I am convinced of this, and I think that the getting rid of the Player's Handbook +1 rule is just a huge piece of evidence that game balance is fully dead in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition now, especially with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. If you play in a game where the Dungeon Master allows the PHB, the DMG, and the Monster Manual, and does not allow you to use Tasha's, you're playing in a suck game, right? And the reason why is, man, it's got stuff, everything, like the tattoos, the magic items, the patron option, everything in Tasha's is much, much better than in Player's Handbook, right? It is power creep the lid pulled off. It is just, your game is going to be much, much less powerful and less exciting and less out of control, right? Like, this is putting a turbocharger on this is taking a fast sports car and putting a turbocharger on it. It's just flat out faster, better, cooler, right? And the reality, and pretending that Tasha's balance is absurd. Tasha's is way more powerful than any source book ever written, right? For 5th edition, right? Maybe more powerful than anything ever written for any edition, right? Maybe not. But it's certainly the most powerful. It really is ridiculous. So now, where does that put us? Is this a problem that Wizards of the Coast lost control and could not give us game balance in 5th edition 7 years in? No, absolutely not. This is not a problem at all, right? If you've been working for 7 years on an edition, right, and it gets out of control then, that's fine. That's fine, right? And the reason why is there's this balance between game balance, right, having a really tight, cohesive game balance with no broken builds in it, and just being able to sell a product to somebody, right? Nobody wants your vanilla, perfectly balanced nonsense 7 years into the campaign, right? They're like, let's pull the roof off this MFer and let's go, right? Let's get some crazy stuff in here, right? And that's what Tasha's is. Tasha's is bonkers, man. There's this bag full of teeth in there that just it's ridiculous. You could fill your mouth with attuned magic items. There's just crazy stuff and ridiculously powerful things in this book, right? Which I love, right? So really where we've landed is Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Dungeons & Dragons, before Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, was cool, svelte Elvis, right? After Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Dungeons & Dragons has become Fat Elvis, right? Now, the thing is, Fat Elvis had his own moments, right? He was into karate. What? Take Elvis and add karate? That's pretty cool, right? The other thing is, Fat Elvis, he really had some, unusual, and by the way, I'm not being disrespectful in any way. That's a term that people use. And I think he was, I'm a big guy myself. I'm not saying that in any cruel way, right? So Fat Elvis, the other thing is he was, really passionate, and very sorrowful. He had a lot of pain in his life, And there's this, really famous rendition, I think, of Love Me Tender that he did when he was Fat Elvis that's deeply soulful and passionate, right? And not really like anything he made when he was young, right? And so that's the point. We're at the Fat Elvis stage. I'm all for it, man. People love Fat Elvis, people love Svelte Elvis, and people love that we have both, right? And I love the days of game balanced 5e, but now we in the pull the roof off this sucker. Let's get some craziness up in this joint, right? And that's where we are now, and I love them both, right? And it's perfectly okay to have a crazy 3-4 years at the end of 5th edition that are really, very unbalanced. By the way, game balance is it's a myth that only bad DMs really adhere to. Good DMs don't need game balance. They understand how powerful the Dungeon Master role is. So I'm all for this. I love it. And I'm very, very much in support of them getting rid of the PHB +1 rule. But I think the real thing to take note of is that's what this really is. It's Wizards of the Coast admitting, yeah, game balance is dead. Let's all rejoice. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.